Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Happy Friday to you. It's a great day to be together and talk about family. It's the first Friday of the month. And if you've been around here a while, you know what we do on the first Friday of the month. We talk about family. In fact, we call it Family First Fridays. See what I did there? So it's February, year of our Lord 2025, and it seemed appropriate to talk about romance in marriage and raising a family. And I realize that some of you aren't in the same stage as others here, and that's okay. This may not be applicable to you, or maybe it seems like ancient history. But there are other people around that need some counsel here. So maybe you'll find some value. For those of you, especially with younger kids at home, and by younger, I mean, Sana says, should I be sending my kids out of the room? I don't think so. I'll try to keep this appropriate, but every parent's a little different in that. Anyway, I just saw that comment. That was funny. I thought I'd attract that, address that. So I've been trying to think through how to get into this, how to approach this, because I'm stumbling all over my words here. My wife and I are, as most of you know, we are on the other side of all of this. We have raised our children. We have our first grandchild, and two of my kids are married. And I look at those situations. I look at my kids and my grandkid, and I look at my relationship with my wife, and I'm thankful and pleased with where we are from this perspective. I think I can say that if my children have marriages like Krista and our marriage, I think I will be thrilled with that. I think our kids will be very happy. Do you know what I mean by that? It's like at each stage, early on, before we had kids, when we were first married, then through the whole child raising era, and now on this end of it, when we are not raising children, we are moving into this, this upper middle age grandparent stage. I think my kids, if they have a similar marriage all the way through those stages as Krista and I have, I think they will be thrilled. How about you? Wherever you are on the spectrum, would you want your children to have the kind of marriage that you have had or that you currently have? Maybe you're young. Maybe you're, in your 20s, early 30s, you have very young children and you're in the midst of the child raising, and that's a busy time, right? There's a high responsibility impact on marriage and focus and all of that. That's not the time to lose sight of marriage for the sake of the kids, that kind of thing. So anyway, the reason I was struggling I couldn't figure out how I wanted to get into this, but I think that's a reasonable question. That's a helpful question to ask. Maybe I'll just say it this way. Would you want others, especially your children, to have the kind of marriage that you have now? And if not, are you willing to do what it takes now to change those things? So anyway, there's my introduction, weak as it is, maybe. So it's February, it's Valentine's month, and I must be candid here. I don't put a lot of stock in Valentine's Day. We've never made Valentine's Day a particularly special day. In fact, I would say we have not, for the last, 15 or 20 years, my wife and I have not done much on Valentine's Day. She's a little more sentimental and likes the holiday. I don't want the calendar or the culture to tell me when I have to romance my wife. Plus, everything is so busy anyway. So we have not made a big deal of Valentine's Day, but we have made the heart of Valentine's Day through our whole marriage. But that's had to have, we've had to be intentional about that. So my thumbnail, and this is probably why Sana asked the question, my thumbnail, don't ever stop chasing her around the bedroom. Let me give you the backstory to that. So when I was first married, I had a business partner in my second business that I'd started. And this guy was, well, at the time he seemed old. He was actually a little bit younger than I am now. But at the time he seemed old. And he had been married and divorced and had a teenage daughter. And he was a dear man and dear friend. Whenever we talked about family, there was a little bit of a sadness there. Obviously, having been divorced, you can understand that. Anyway, so again, get the setting. I'm newly married, and here's a guy that had been married for many years and then ended up in divorce. And I asked him, one day, what did he learn? What's the secret of marriage? What would he give? What counsel would he give me as a young newlywed guy? And he said, don't ever stop chasing her around the bedroom. Now, for those of you who've been married a little while, think back to the early days, especially as a man. Think back to the first year of your marriage. Can you imagine anyone needing to tell you, don't stop chasing her around the bedroom? I actually was kind of taken back by that. Like, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? Why would any man ever be tempted to stop that? Well, what I learned over time, not only in my own marriage, but when I became a pastor and began working with families, couples, and my wife and I have, worked with dozens and dozens and dozens, and if you count the marriage conferences we used to do and so on, hundreds of couples. That was much more pertinent counsel than I realized at the time. It's not because the interest in sex goes away, but everything else that makes up marriage gets in the way, and so suddenly the pursuit, you're tempted to give up on the pursuit because you stop doing all the things that made you attracted to each other and attractive to each other in the first place, and strife and so on, and time and busyness and all that. So as I wrote in my marriage book, sex is a barometer of how everything else is going. So it's not as simple as just pursue that part of the relationship. You've got to pursue all the other things that lead up to that. But it's just something that stuck in my mind. And as foolish as I thought that counsel was early on, I realized, okay, marriage and romance take a lot of focus and effort. Called out and bought out says, sorry, just getting here. Been chasing my wife around the bedroom. LOL. Excellent. Good for you. So I don't want to get too heavy with this. And again, I'm not going to get too much beyond PG here at most. But as I think about what Krista and I did with young children in the home and how we focus on this, I thought it would be helpful. Because again, here's the thing. I want to just encourage all of you. It can be done. We are living proof. We love being married on this end of it. I remember over the years talking to so many parents that it was just such a sad day when their children left the home. Not only because it's my child and they've been part of my life for the last 18, 20, 25 years, whatever, but now they're kind of getting on their own and independent. But so many of the couples that I witnessed over the years as their kids grew up and moved out, the couples would kind of look at each other like, who are you? And what do we do now? Because their focus was so much on raising the kids They had not focused on each other, and in fact, in so many cases, had grown estranged, almost become roommates. Like they were co-laborers in raising the children, but they forgot about what it means to be a husband and wife. Now, you know me well enough. If you've been around, you know I take very seriously the responsibility for parenting, and you are co-laborers in raising your children, of course. But you're more than that. You're not less than that, but you're more than that. And my counsel to young married husbands and wives when they start having children is keep doing the work it takes so that when your kids are gone, when they're grown, you're excited about that as husband and wife. For my wife and I, we're like, woohoo, it's just back to me and you. We have the house to ourselves, and we don't have that responsibility anymore. And that takes work and it takes effort. And we are now living the fruit of all of the time we spent making sure that our marriage was front and center and thriving, that we love being together. We love being married together. We love doing the child rearing and all the other things together, so that it's just a different phase now that the kids are grown. Does that make sense? Are you tracking with that? But I'm telling you, if you are in the early stages of parenthood here, this takes more effort and intentional focus than you may imagine. You don't want to end up as just roommates on the other end of kids. Now, maybe what I observed is not maybe it's not the norm. It's possible that y'all are going, yeah, we don't have any problem here, and every marriage we know is just thriving as the kids get older. But that certainly has not been what I have observed. Sherry says, take it from me. I lost my husband of 40 years to cancer this year. He always chased me. Enjoy your time together. That is wonderful and sobering at the same time. Yeah, that's you have mentioned some of that before, and that's my and our heart goes out to you, Sherry, and may the Lord continue to comfort as you continue to grieve this. But thanks for sharing that he was always chasing you. It's part of the reason that you feel the loss, as you knew his love and interest in you, I'm sure. All right, well, so let's talk about some practical things here. Here's what Krista and I did. And I will tell you, as the husband, it was mostly on me to take the lead here. Now, our circumstance was my wife was homeschooling, so her attention was so much on the children. And so I took it upon myself as her husband, as the head of the home, as her leader, her head, to make sure that I set the stage. I created the environment where she was my wife first, mother second. Did you catch that? I always wanted Krista to feel like a wife first and a mother second. Now that's not about time. She spent far more of her time with the children than she did being my wife. I would go to the office. She was home with the children. So it's not simply about time. But the things that make her a wife and feel like a wife, I made sure that I took the lead and pursued those things with her, and encouraged her to think of me as her husband before father. So one of the ways is simply the weekly date night. Now, I know in the last 20 years, this has been up and down in Christian circles. There was the whole purity movement, there was the romance movement, and then there was a pushback that because the whole romance movement kind of got too effeminate, frankly. And I think we've swung too far the other way. And there was almost, in certain Christian circles, there was this almost what some are described as a legalistic approach to date night. If you didn't have it, you're a bad husband and wife and marriage and all that. So I don't care what any of those people say. Here's the point. Here's what I know is true for us, and I would encourage you to give this consideration. when my wife was raising newborns and ones and twos and threes and fours and 5-year-olds and 6 and 7, 8, 9 and 10 and 12 and homeschooling and all that, so much of her attention was going to teaching them to not only the schoolwork, but teaching my daughters how to take care of the home and so on. And of course, I had a role in that with them as well. But so much of her time and energy was going to that. By having the weekly date night, it was Monday night because Monday was my day off, and every Monday with almost no exception. I bet you for 12, 15 years, we might miss 2 Mondays a year. That night, that date night, Krista knew that amidst everything else going on in our busy lives, she was going to have my undivided attention for a few hours. And that was tremendous for her. If you could talk to her, if she were here joining us and you could ask her, she would tell you that was crucial to everything for all those years. And sometimes I always plan the date nights, probably 90% of the time. Occasionally she would. And sometimes it was the traditional romantic kind of thing. A lot of times it was just going for a dinner, going for a walk, something, and just talking. And especially as the kids got a little bit older, I steered our conversation away from the kids and talked about other things so that she realized her life was more than raising children. And that is in no way to minimize the importance of raising children. But she was my wife first, and I wanted her to always feel like my wife first. So gentlemen, if you're married, I would encourage you, make time, especially if she's home with the kids. Make time so she has some experiences with you outside of that. For us, it was absolutely crucial. So do you see the difference between some sort of a theoretical, every couple is supposed to have date night? That's not why we did it, because somebody else placed expectations on us. No, it was because I knew, I wanted to spend time with her away from the kids too. So, and I took the charge of that. I set up the babysitting. I made sure we had childcare. I planned the date. I would tell her, be ready at 5:30, wear something warm, wear something nice, wear something casual, get your walking shoes on, whatever. She wouldn't even know where we were going most of the time. And I would just say, be ready at 5:30, dress this way. And then we'd go, and she's like, I don't have to make a decision. I don't have to do anything, but just be with my husband and hang out. I'd be curious for the wives that are here now. Does any of that sound attractive to you? Would you enjoy that kind of thing? Amy says, I had to retrain how to be a good partner. I was so turned upside down taking on the role of mom that partner moved to the bottom of the list, and it was the worst for both of us. Yeah. And I would say your husband obviously has a huge part in that. And if husbands don't take the lead in this, that is the default setting for wives. And I think a lot of guys don't know and appreciate that, or they don't know how to change it. And I'm telling you, at least for us, this is how I change it. Amy says, we turned it around and it's such a complete feeling now, but it took habit builder that seems strange in the beginning. Yep. Sona says, for those who can't afford or find childcare, we at times did home date nights, just sent the kids to bed early. Yeah, we did that a lot as well, depending on how old the kids are. And this is where everything else we talk about comes into play. You've got to discipline your children so they will obey you. Because if you put them down and you spend 2 or 3 hours continuing to put them down, then you don't have any good time together. So it all factors in together. You've got to discipline them. And if you train them well, then they will go to bed or at least stay in the bedroom when you tell them to, and then you can have time. So we did that as well. And in our situation, there were lots of people in the church who wanted to bless us. So we had lots of older couples that were willing to come sit with our kids. In fact, there was one couple that kind of arranged that, which was a huge blessing. And I know not all of you have that, but I've heard of other couples doing this where you get together with couples in the same stage of life and say, hey, can we rotate through? So maybe you can't do it every week. Maybe trade off. So you get date night every other week kind of thing. But yes, be creative. Doesn't have to be expensive. It's more about the time together and not having to spend your focus on the children. So that's one thing we did. So the other thing we did is we would at least, at the very minimum once, usually twice a year, we would get away for 2 nights, 3 days. And that took more planning, obviously, took saving up money, but it was just so important for us. So we would find somebody that we trusted, and that's not an easy thing these days, to find someone you trust with your children. We were very protective. We were very scrutinizing. We would not just let anybody take care of our kids, but we would find 1 or 2 families that we trusted and ask them to take our children. And so we would get away for 2 nights, bed and breakfast a lot of times, those kind of things, and just have a great couple of days together and not fill our schedule too much with things to do, but allow that time to be whatever we need. But again, it's important to spend time together physically and mentally and emotionally, all those things. So we did that most years when we had children in the home, and that was so important and helpful to our marriage. And again, I took the role in planning that and scouting out good places to go and having some things to do. Around here in Colorado, it's pretty easy. Go find an Airbnb in one of the mountain towns, and lots of hiking and those kind of things to do. But get creative. You can figure this out. But that was crucial for us the whole time. Another thing that kept marriage at the forefront was constant affection and flirting. And especially, maybe that's not the right way to say it, but certainly in front of the children. For 2 reasons. Number one, why would we stop when kids come around? I mean, I couldn't keep my hands off my wife before we had kids. Why would I stop wanting to put my hands on her after the kids came? The second thing is, it's good for the children to see that. We didn't need to have lengthy talks with our kids about modesty and appropriate physical contact with the opposite sex. Now, we did have those conversations, don't get me wrong. But what we found early on was, because Krista and I were constantly flirting and playful with each other in their presence, my kids realized that's what a husband and wife are supposed to do. And they would see, as they got older, they would see, teenagers out in public or whatever doing what Krista and I do in front of them. And they would make comments like they realized, wait a minute, those two who are not married are acting like a married couple. You see what I'm saying? They put it together sort of naturally. Wait a minute, this is what a husband and wife are supposed to do. Why are they doing it? And that led into very good conversations. So we were always very open with our kids about sex and sexuality and temptation and all those things as far as just having these discussions. But I did find it fascinating that growing up, seeing Krista and I being flirty and affectionate and playful, they realized that's what married folks are supposed to do. And why is that woman dressing like that? She should only be doing that for her husband, which led to very easy conversations. The other thing is, the world is bombarding us with the message that fun, playful sexuality is for the unmarried. That's what you do in your single life. And then when you get married, it all goes away. It's drudgery. It's boring. Why would you ever want to restrict yourself to one partner, right? All of that. And what we know is true is, no, God created the romance and the sex for a married couple. So we need to show our children married relationship is not drudgery and boredom. So, gentlemen, put your hands on your wife in front of the kids. And wives, put your hands on your husband in front of the kids and flirt with each other. Make them blush. Make them blush. One of my favorite stories is when my oldest was, I think she was 12. And we came home from church. And she asked me a question. We're standing in the kitchen. My daughter and I were standing at the counter in the kitchen. And she asked me a question. Now, Krista, my wife, had gone upstairs. And I said, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. But first, I need to go talk to your mom for a moment. And my 12-year-old daughter said, uh-huh. And I realized what she was saying. She's like, yeah, I know what it means that you're going to go talk to mom. And I just started laughing. I said, well, actually, this time we are going to talk. I'll be right back. We weren't conscious of how observant they were. It was about that same time that on a date night, I think it was, maybe it was Valentine's Day, I forget. We came home from dinner and my kids had made a little sign and put it on our bedroom door with in a heart shape. They had put candles in our bedroom, and I don't remember if it was flower petals, but something, sort of just traditional romantic stuff. They had candles burning and something else, and they had a little, I can't remember all that they did, but they put a sign on our door that said something like, romance sweet or something, and then put in parentheses, don't be concerned about interruption for fear of great embarrassment or something like. In other words, they were saying, you guys, we've created this little, love pad for you in your bedroom, and don't worry, we're not going to disturb you because we don't want to be embarrassed. We didn't teach them to do that. They saw our relationship and they put it together. And so it was fascinating. This was before we had any in-depth discussions with them. So anyway, I remember that distinctly. I got to go talk to your mom. Uh-huh. Jenny says, my husband and I are flirty and such with each other. Our kids used to say things like, ooh, gross, but I think now they're starting to get used to it. Exactly. You want your kids constantly. I mean, my kids would say, get a room. Like, I have a room. In fact, every room in the house is mine. Which one do you want me to pick? And they're like, not my room, not my bedroom. Absolutely. You want them to see that. You want your kid. Think about this. You want your daughter to welcome that from her husband. Right? Not from any dude, but from her husband. And you want to model for your son what it looks like to have a great marriage. This is not to be secret. Now, there's a difference between secrecy and privacy, right? All of my wife's and my sexuality is private. But we never kept it secret from our kids. We wanted them to see this is what husbands and wives do, all of it. Not just the act itself, but all of the flirty and I like my wife's body. I didn't hide that from my kids. There's a whole book about this in the scripture. It's all over the place. Why would we act like this is not reality? Right? One of the things I say, by the way, so I wrote a book here that's called God's Design for Marriage, and this is the blue one. This is the premarital edition, and it's intended to walk couples through getting ready for marriage. There is a red one that has the same looking cover, except it's red instead of blue, and this here says marital edition instead of pre-married. If you are married, I would encourage you, get a copy of this. Shameless plug here. Get a copy of the red one if you're married. If you know someone who's engaged, get them the blue one. But in both editions, I told the story. So I wrote it years ago. My kids were young. But I remember I told the story of knowing someday a man is going to come calling from my daughters. And that would create some ambivalence in me because on the one hand, I know that one of the reasons they would pursue my daughters is because they find her attractive, physically attractive, which means he's been looking at her body and says, I like that. That is attractive to me. And the ambivalence is, part of me wants to reach for the Louisville Slugger and say, oh yeah, keep your eyes off my daughter. On the other hand, I wouldn't let a man marry my daughter if he didn't find her physically attractive. That's reality. I mean, my daughter's been married for a while now. They have a child. Do I want my son-in-law not to find my daughter attractive? Of course not. Of course he looks at her that way. And he did before they got married. Why would I stop with my wife? That's part of the joys of being married. So, gentlemen, don't be afraid of it. And wives either. Don't be afraid of admitting, I like to look at her. I like her body. I like to pursue her body. That's all good. And show your children this is what a marriage is supposed to do. Not a single, pursuit romp, but no, this is what marriage is supposed to be. So they look forward to that in their own marriage and see the distinction from the world. And the last thing I'll just say is, and this is going to hit some of you where you don't like, but you've got to get and stay physically attractive. I just think that is one of the selfish things we do or attempted to do to let ourselves go physically. Don't do that. And if you've put on weight, lose it. Just decide, out of love for your spouse, you're going to do that. Get in the gym, eat healthier for all these things. I'm not even going to try to defend that further. I would just encourage you to search your heart a little bit if you have let yourself go and realize this is, I can do better for my spouse. I can love him or her in this way better. So anyway, all that to say, I think it's worth your time to reflect on your marriage, especially if you have kids at home, and ask the question, would I want my children to grow up and have the kind of marriage that we currently have? If the answer is yes, then keep going. And you can always get better. If the answer is no, then say, okay, let's decide the changes we're going to make to improve our marriage and enjoy it. It's not designed to be drudgery. There's a lot of hard work in every phase of life. But there is supposed to be what we call romantic, pleasurable, sexual aspect. It is the defining act of marriage. The two shall become one flesh. That means they have sex. And all the other things lead to that event. So you got to do it all. You can't just, no one, in all my years of counseling, I never had a couple come in and say, we have a thriving life in the bedroom, but the rest of our marriage is awful. No, all those other things lead to the bedroom. But it's intended to be pleasurable and joyful. And it's a picture of Christ in the church. Again, there's an entire book in the scripture devoted to sex and romance. If you have been told that Song of Songs is about Jesus and the church in some analogical, abstract way, nope, it's not. When Solomon talked about breasts, he meant breasts. It's part of the wonder and the joy of looking forward to our relationship with our husband someday. Now, don't take that imagery too far, but it's supposed to be pleasurable and fun and exciting. And you don't have to let that go. So, all right, I will leave it there. If you're looking for help, get my book and see if that helps. And find an older couple that has a thriving marriage and ask them questions and ask them what they've done. But it takes time. Bottom line, this is not that hard. It takes time and focus and effort, but it's worth it. So I will leave it there. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll come back Monday and pick up with Revelation. Grace and peace to you.